Good afternoon. Welcome to the signing of the joint declaration on EU-NATO cooperation by the President of the European Council, the President of the European Commission, and the Secretary General of NATO.
You.
Okay, it's mine. Yeah, you can talk.
And we will now proceed to remarks by the President of the European Council, the President of the European Commission, and the Secretary General of NATO. Mr. Tusk, you have the floor.
Thank you, dear friends. We have just signed a joint EU-NATO declaration which brings the cooperation between the European Union and NATO to the next level. The aim is clear. We want to protect European citizens with all possible means available, and there is no better partner than NATO. That is why we have agreed today to strengthen EU-NATO ties in crucially important areas. They include improving the military mobility of troops and equipment, common preparedness for cyber and hybrid attacks, fighting terrorism, and stopping migrant smugglers in the Mediterranean. The fullest possible involvement in our activities of EU member states that are not NATO members will be encouraged and facilitated in an all-inclusive, non-discriminatory manner without any artificial obstacles. Speaking on the eve of the NATO summit here in Brussels, I would like to address President Trump directly, who, for a long time now, has been criticizing Europe almost daily for, in his view, insufficient contributions to the common defense capabilities, and for living off the US. Dear President Trump, America does not have and will not have a better ally than Europe. Today, Europeans spend on defense many times more than Russia and as much as China. And I think you can have no doubt, Mr. President, that this is an investment in common American and European defense and security, which can't be said with confidence about Russian or Chinese spending. I would therefore have two remarks here. First of all, dear America, appreciate your allies. After all, you don't have that many. And dear Europe, spend more on your defense because everyone respects an ally that is well prepared and equipped. Money is important, but genuine solidarity is even more important. Speaking about solidarity, I want to dispel the American president's argument, which says that the US alone protects Europe against our enemies, and that the US is almost alone in this struggle. Europe was first to respond on a large scale when the US was attacked and called for solidarity after 9/11. European soldiers have been fighting shoulder to shoulder with American soldiers in Afghanistan. 870 brave European men and women sacrificed their lives, including 40 soldiers from my homeland, Poland. Dear Mr. President, please remember about this tomorrow when we meet at the NATO summit, but above all when you meet President Putin in Helsinki. It is always worth knowing who is your strategic friend and who is your strategic problem. Thank you.
Monsieur le Président.
Oui, on a more timid way. I wanted to welcome today's declaration, which is an important landmark in our partnership. It builds on what we have already achieved together over the last 2 years, and it strengthens our commitments to one another. Since the last NATO summit in Warsaw in 2016, where we signed our last joint declaration, our cooperation has gone from strength to strength. NATO and the European Union are the most natural of partners. It is a matter of safety and a matter of common sense. We share 22 members and almost 95% of EU citizens now living in a NATO country. We share the same commitment to making people safe and more secure. We share the same values. NATO and the European Union have the same attachment to freedom and democracy. And of course, we face many of the same challenges and threats. So never has it been more sense to cooperate together and complement each other's work. I want to insist on the word complementarity, because this is what defines our partnership. We are autonomous, yes, but we work together. We do things sometimes differently, but we make sure they are coherent with each other's work. And we have different strengths which we use to help one another. Europe has decided to take responsibility for its own security. NATO is a cornerstone of that strategy, and we are working full steam to implement the 74 joint actions which go from countering hybrid threats to cybersecurity, defense and research. This partnership is a cornerstone of our overall security and defense strategy. But we know that we must also do more ourselves. We have made a lot of progress in recent years, notably with the historic launch of permanent structured cooperation, the so-called sleeping beauty of the Lisbon Treaty, now much awake. But there is still a lot to do, and that starts with properly investing in our own security and defense. This is why, as part of our new budget proposals, we, the Commission, we have proposed to increase defense spending by 22 times, bringing total defense spending to 27.5 billion euro from 2021 to 2027. This would equip the European Defence Fund and the Internal Security Fund with the means necessary to protect ourselves from threats and invest in strategic research and capabilities. We also want to move forward military mobility, another key part of our cooperation with NATO. This sums up the spirit of our partnership and the trust and confidence we have in each other. I know this is a message which will be delivered loud and clear at tomorrow's NATO summit. With today's world as it is, Europe must continue to do more to protect itself while deepening our partnership with NATO. Our citizens are simply safer if we work together. This is what today's joint declaration is all about. Thank you.
Secretary General.
President Tusk, President Juncker, dear Donald, dear Jean-Claude, the declaration we signed today is a strong commitment to strengthen the cooperation between the European Union and NATO. And today's declaration builds on the one we signed in Warsaw 2 years ago. Since then, NATO and the European Union have achieved an unprecedented level of cooperation. working together on issues as maritime security, countering hybrid threats, and fighting terrorism. We exchange real-time warnings on cyber attacks, we participate more in each other's exercises, and we work together in responding to the refugee and migrant crisis, including by addressing the root causes in countries like Afghanistan and Iraq, and with cooperation at sea in the Aegean and in central Mediterranean. This new declaration demonstrates our desire to deepen and broaden our cooperation. Facing a complex and uncertain security environment, we must work together to keep our nations and our citizens safe. And that is exactly what we are doing. In the months ahead, we will step up our cooperation on military mobility, which is essential to our deterrence and defense. We will also work together to respond to hybrid threats and to counter terrorism. In the declaration, we welcome the European Union's efforts on defense. Europe is taking more responsibility for its security through PESCO and the European Defence Fund. This is complementary, not an alternative to NATO. NATO remains essential to Euro-Atlantic security. After Brexit, 80% of defense spending in NATO will come from non-EU allies. That is why we also need to ensure the fullest possible involvement of non-EU allies in our cooperation and avoid creating any new barriers. So dear Donald and dear Jean-Claude, thank you for your personal commitment and your leadership in taking this cooperation forward. I look forward to welcoming you both at the NATO summit tomorrow. So thank you. Thank you.
Questions? No.